Okay, so good morning. So we have, this is 1 Million Cups, Seattle. Hopefully this is the right place for you. I see a lot of familiar faces, so I would guess so. All right, we'll dive in. If you're not familiar with 1 Million Cups, Seattle, as far as our contact information, you can grab it right here on the link tree. At some point that'll show up in the chat, and you can click on that and that gives you everything you need. At 1 Million Cups, we're supporting the entrepreneurial community. So that's at large. It doesn't mean that you own a business or that you're even an entrepreneur right at the moment. It could be that you're just part of the community. We're here to support each other, offer help. It's all about building up the people in our community. So what's different about us is that we don't have pitches. We're not here trying to get funding from an angel investor. We're not trying to network to eke out some business from other people. We're just here to hear ideas and to provide support and experience shares around that. 1 Million Cups is a national organization. We're just a local chapter, and but there's a lot of chapters all over the nation, and oftentimes people join us from other chapters and other time zones, like Jesse. He jumps into multiple ones. So here our main thrust is to educate, provide presentations and connections. And right now we're hoping that people will connect with us, that you will learn something. And just a moment, we're going to get into that presentation, which is at the root. There's a lot of positive feedback that we've received about this format and 1 Million Cups in general. You can read all about it online, I'm sure. But what we're trying to do here is to be inclusive and support our community. Sorry, apparently that slide is cut off a little bit there. But every second Tuesday of the month right now, we're doing it in person at the Expansive. If you can join us there, great, RSVP on Meetup. If you can't, then there will be a live stream on Facebook as well as a recording later that you can access. But it's a lot of fun. So we want to thank our sponsors. This is at 1 Million Cups. We do not have a budget allocated to us by the national organization. We just run on the donations from sponsors. And so Method Customization and McLaughlin Method both provide systems for us to run our organization. So thank you very much to them. And we couldn't do it without our volunteer leaders, that's organizers like myself and the other people shown here. And these organizers kind of rotate in and out. So if you want to be an organizer, let us know. Or if you just like to volunteer for a specific task, or there's some way you can help out the community, give us an email and we'd love to talk to you about that. So today we've had the coffee and conversation, or beverage of your choice. This morning, we're going to jump right into our 6-minute presentation. During that presentation, make some notes. And afterwards, there's going to be a 20-minute Q&A where you can share your experiences or comments, provide feedback, and then we're going to have a few minutes for breakout rooms for some one-on-one connections. So during that presentation, just like Matthew said earlier, limit those distractions. Make sure that you're focused in on what they're presenting and understand it so that you can provide some input. Remember that we don't know their business better than them, that we're here to share experience, that we don't use should, or we're not giving advice to the person. We're just here to support them. If we get to that 20-minute Q&A, I'm going to be calling on people. I'd ask that you use the raise hand function in your reactions. I will call on you, and then we can kind of go through that so we can keep things orderly. With that, we're going to go into the presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and get that presentation. Perfect. Yeah, we can see that. Go ahead and jump in.
Shashank, you ready?
Yeah, should I start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Before I begin, just one thing. At sometimes I'm going to use the word emotional intelligence interchangeably with EI or EQ. Those are all the same things for clarity purposes. All right, let's begin. The global workplace is undergoing a big change. Millennials will represent 75% of the global workforce in 2025. Last year, 4.5 million people quit their jobs. US businesses lose $11 billion each year due to employee turnover. And on top of that, the COVID-19 pandemic has turned the world of traditional HR upside down. Some of the biggest challenges that human resource leaders are facing are addressing employee turnover and improving productivities. One of the ways of dealing with these challenges is focusing on the human side, soft skills, specifically emotional intelligence. Let's talk about EQ at work. A large hospital reduced their critical care nursing turnover from 65 to 15% within just 18 months of implementing an EQ screening assessment. 93% of employees at a Motorola manufacturing plant became more productive after the plant adopted a stress reduction and EQ program. Southwest Airlines has a high EQ culture. They have just 4% voluntary turnover and no furloughs ever, even during the pandemic. Companies that understand the value of soft skills thrive even when facing harsh economic environments. There is much more to people than their resumes. Competency research in over 200 companies and organizations across the world found that emotional intelligence was twice as important as technical and cognitive ability in distinguishing top performers from average ones. And in senior leadership positions, it was 4 times as important. Emotional intelligence can save over 75% of careers from being derailed due to lack of emotional competencies. Traditional interviews are very subjective and might not consistently and reliably assess emotional intelligence or soft skills. And this method is not scalable because, let's admit, we all have limited time in HR. Soft skills personality-based assessments such as the Myers-Briggs and the Big Five are subjective and self-reported, and assessment takers tend to produce socially accepted answers rather than what's really true. I realized that I had to do something to address the employee turnover and improve culture and productivity. In 2019, I met Andre and EQMatch was born. Together with a team of industrial organization psychologists, we developed an objective emotional intelligence assessment solution that identifies the level of emotional intelligence of candidates and existing team members. EQMatch enables HR leaders to objectively consider highly EQ job applicants alongside their resumes. EQMatch provides scores across 4 primary areas of emotional intelligence, as well as an overall score. EQMatch helps reduce turnover, and it helps improve job performance by assessing and improving EQ. The process is scientific, reliable, quick, and user-friendly. At EQMatch, we have 2 pricing models. We have a SaaS model for SMBs and a customized model for enterprises. You can contact us today at hello@eqmatch.co to receive a free no-obligation demo and a free trial. We are all humans before employees. Thank you.
Wow, that's great. Give a little bit of virtual applause there. That's awesome. We'll say that was, I like that presentation. Great.
Thank
you. Let's dive into, hold on just a second. And we'll put that information on there in the chat. And just so that we can see people better when they're asking the questions, you can go ahead and stop sharing your screen. The presentation's perfect. And with that, do we have anybody that would like to dive in for questions? Raise their hand. While you guys are thinking about that, I'm gonna, okay, great. We'll have Beverly, go ahead and jump in.
So this is kind of like a personality test or emotional intelligence test. Like, what is it based on? Is it like approved, or was it formulated by psychologists, or like what is kind of like, what is that word? You know, the word I'm looking for. Like, how do you say, hey, this is legitimate, this isn't just, you know,
Thank
one
you,
of
Beverly.
those Facebook quizzes or something like that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Let me try to answer that. First of all, it's not just a personality assessment, because most of the personality assessment tests out there believe in one single fact, that human beings' personality is static. Our solution believes in the fact that your personality is dynamic. How you feel today versus how you feel tomorrow is completely different. It depends on a lot of interactions with other people, our personal environments, external environments, and so on. The second part of your question, yes, we have two industrial organization psychologists who have worked almost 2 years to develop this framework. The framework itself has been, there's scientific research behind that. I would encourage you to go to our website and download the 50, 60-page white paper on that. That includes all the scientific research that has gone beyond about creating this amazing framework. I hope that answers your question, Beverly.
Great, thank you. Matthew.
Yeah, so I'm looking at it from the perspective of an employer who has an HR manager, or even a series of people who are responsible for giving feedback on, on candidates as they're moving through a process. And I get that the user, the candidate would probably fill out some form or do a Q&A, and then that data would be sent over to whatever the back end is. Do you provide any education or resources on how to interpret that data, so that the hiring people have a sense of, well, okay, I see they scored an X on this particular aspect. What does that really mean? Does that mean that, because otherwise it's subjective. It's like, oh, well, or I would assume that it might be somewhat subjective. So I'm trying to understand, like, how do you help the employer to really leverage this tool effectively?
As you said, Matthew, there are two ways we are doing it. One, we are providing the scores across 4 different areas of emotional intelligence. Okay. Once the report of a person is generated, all those areas have suggestions. How do you improve upon those things? That's first for the candidate to look at. The second thing is we also provide EQ training, which is a second part of a solution. Once an employee or an employer, a company has onboarded our solution, and if they want our help to build the EQ culture within the organization, we deliver both in-person and virtual training for improving emotional intelligence across the organization.
Got it. Okay. Okay, that makes sense.
Great, thank you. Sheila, you had a question.
Where are you? There you are. Hi, that was really slick with the video. I like that. I'm wondering, how do you really define emotional intelligence, and what is the opposite of emotional intelligence?
It's a great question, never been asked this. Will try my best to answer that, Sheila. I don't think there is an opposite of emotional intelligence. There is a parallel, I would say, what we call intellectual quotient, or IQ, what we have been using since decades. But I don't think there is an opposite, or it's the right term to use, an antonym of emotional intelligence at all. I would say that the best way is somebody who is emotionally unintelligent would be something an opposite of that, but not a parallel. Yeah. And emotional intelligence, the best way to summarize from a layman's term is, how do you manage, recognize other people's emotions, your own emotions, and how do you act accordingly in that situation without letting your emotions dictate you? That's how I would say emotional intelligence could be summarized.
Cool. And our people, our leaders, our teams, like, how are they keying in that that's something that they need?
I do not understand that. Would you mind rephrasing that for me?
Yeah, like, are people, our leaders, our teams going around shopping for EQ solutions, or what is the what is the straw that breaks that camel's back that says we have an EQ problem here?
This is something that only emotionally intelligent leaders would realize in the first place. A lot of people, including us, would not be, we are not really happy admitting that we have a problem in the first place. And especially in leadership positions, EQ is highly valued. I have seen that a lot of companies, even when I've interviewed in the past, they use some of the personality assessment tests, culture tests. But to answer your question, the point when they actually realize they need something like that EQ assessment is when they're having really high turnover. When people are quitting, even when everything is in place, they're paying people good salaries, the jobs are pretty well defined, and still there's a high turnover. That's one. The second thing is when they do not have, when they have a lot of issues with succession planning, when especially in leadership roles, that's where they realize that this is not something that we can take a piece of paper or a resume, if you will, to define that this person would be the next CEO or the CMO or the CFO. So I think there's a couple of factors that factor in here.
Oh, thank you.
Great, thank you. And Phil.
Yeah, a couple of questions. I think first, and the more important one, I'm curious because in the proposal of this tool or program, there are hints towards it being utilized as an assessment or qualification tool for new candidates. As, okay, can we take new candidates and based upon this assess how well they will emotionally engage and involve in their roles based upon the stresses that they're going to be under, based upon the leadership that they're going to be required to be in, right? That's one element of it. But then at the same time, you're proposing that there are tools for improving this within yourself and fostering this and developing this. So I guess my question is this more as a company, is your focus more on this being a tool for finding the right candidates and getting them into your organization, or for within your organization, making assessments of your own team and developing them? Or is it both? And if it is both, is that then too muddied? I guess is my question.
Yeah, Phil, so let's look at it from the demand supply side. I think the demand would generally come from companies, because when there's a job out there, they are one who going to post this job. So employers are first of all looking at qualified candidates, both from hard skills and soft skills. Since the demand is going to come from employers, they're going to be the first to understand that there is a problem. Generally, an employee might not do that in the first place. Having said that, since we have training programs for building emotional intelligence, the next step, which is not the first part of the solution, which is the second module, does address building emotional intelligence in existing teams. That's where specifically the employees or individuals come into play. So it's not muddied at all. We have a really good bifurcation or separation, if you will, and those are offered as different modules or solutions during different part of the recruiting and onboarding training journey.
Very good, very good. Okay, and that kind of answers my second question, which was the fact that you mentioned EQ as being a dynamic thing and people being dynamic, and so if this is an assessment tool, in one sense, you're just taking a snapshot. If it is dynamic, you're taking a snapshot of their EQ at that moment, as opposed to there's no real way you can assess something over the long term, and that's where having the second development tool comes in. So that's interesting. Cool.
That's correct, Phil. Thank you.
Well, thanks. Yeah. Jesse.
Yeah, thank you. So gentlemen, several questions, but let's start with the simplicity one. It's a crowded space. There's some quality stuff out there. It's a hot topic that people are just learning about it.
Right.
We've been researching and understanding this for years. It's always funny that the trends finally catch up. But what do you think, or how do you offer that you think is going to separate your offer?
So what is our UVP, or unique selling proposition? That's correct rephrasing?
Absolutely, sure.
A couple of things. A lot of these existing personality assessment tests, like I mentioned during the presentation, like the Myers-Briggs or the Big Five, The biggest flaw in that is they consider personality static. And I think that's where the major problem lies. How Jesse interacts with me today and tomorrow might not be the same, depends on your situations. That's the first thing. Let's also look at the assessment taker side. When I, as a person, am looking at a cultural index test or some of these personality assessment tests, these questions ask me, how would you rate yourself when you are in a team? Are you dynamic? Are you motivated? In most cases, I'm going to look at the things that are the most positive. I'm going to answer that because that makes me feel better. It's very subjective. So that is a major flaw, because nobody's going to say in a culture index test that, you know, I'm not good at managing. I'm a really negative person. I get angry pretty quickly. I think most people would not say that because that's human, right? We don't like to address or recognize these are the problems we have when you are using a subjective assessment. Our assessment does not talk about you. It talks about other people's scenario. It captures how would you interact, how would you recognize a scenario that's not about you, about other people. So it puts the emphasis from you to other while capturing these EQ4 traits of us. So I think that's the biggest thing. Another thing is all these personality assessments, they have, for the most part, missed EQ. They have not focused on EQ. They have focused on very job-related stuff that if a manager comes to you and talks to you this way, what would you do? I would respond this way. And it's very, again, subjective. It does not consider this human element of that. And that's what we're trying to address with our solution.
Yeah, fantastic. That's kind of some key points I was hoping to hear. Curiosity is on the development side, and I've seen this a lot of times, is that I've looked at your product several times and gone through the website, is that a lot of times I don't want to say test taker, but the user that's using it feels that there is a third option, that something's not missed there. Has that ever been addressed within the company to have an A or other?
I might not have gotten it. Maybe Andre might answer that.
Yeah, so I think what you're asking is, do we present any, or are we missing any options on the screen that could have been potential answer? Is that what you're asking?
Sure.
Jesse?
So a lot of times these assessments, I've looked at dozens of these before, and I've even gone through yours, is that sometimes individuals that take this feel that there's a third option that's not representing the way they feel or an answer. And has the team addressed that or thought about that? And does that affect the analytics?
The way we address it is that we give multiple options that people can choose. So you can select multiple answers that most likely fit the situation. And in fact, some of the questions, the right answer is to choose multiple answers. So that's how we're addressing it.
Ah, perfect. Yeah, I was guessing that because I haven't seen many places that let you choose multiple, and I think yours is the first I've seen of that.
And we actually will, if you don't choose one of, for example, we have 6 options. If you don't choose the right 3 options, you get hit points hit for not missing it. So this also addresses issue of people just guessing. It's very difficult to guess 3 right ones out of 6.
Yeah, that's a fantastic knowledge, and be sure that you share that in knowledge and in investors.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Cool. Looks like Matthew, you're up next.
Yeah, so I'm curious about so the last time I did an EQ assessment, I recall there being 15 categories that it was evaluating, and in fact I have it open here. It was so self-regard, emotional expression, empathy, etc. Right? So there's these clear categories, and in what I heard you say, you kind of boil it down to 4 key points. So can you kind of help me to understand how did you collaborate with either the domain experts and or with relative to your knowledge to get it from what I perceive as a complex set of data points or issues to the 4 that you've chosen as the core 4 for a hiring manager?
Yep, I can answer that one. There's a lot of scientific research that we have gone through that looks at key areas of psychology and how people process emotions. And these 4 areas that we're evaluating, we found that breaking them down further to more granular is counterproductive. And so we're able to identify the scores for, in order to produce more accurate results, it's actually easier for or better for us to judge only for those 4 categories that are ability to recognize emotions, ability to evaluate those emotions that are recognized, and ability to manage own emotions, and ability to influence other people's emotions. So those are kind of 4 categories that we provide a score. And what you described with the categories, that kind of gets into profiling section. Hey, you're more um, you more into that category, less into that category, and we just give a score on how well you do on each, and the overall score as well.
Thank you.
Nice. Beverly, you got a follow up?
Yeah. Do you know if there are cultural differences in the way that emotional intelligence is defined? And if so, how did you address that in your test?
Yep, I think I can answer that one too. So we did think about differences in different cultures from a very, very beginning. As a matter of fact, our team is very, very international. So myself, I'm from Ukraine, Shashank from India. We have Abby, that's from Philippines, and Sharif, that's from Egypt. So you can see that our diversity of our team is pretty big. The way we're addressing the diversity and those type of topics in our assessment is, we actually, after the assessment is complete, we offer for a person who's filling out the assessment to provide us their demographic information. This demographic information is never shared with employer. But we use this demographic information to make sure that we constantly monitor the results that we get from assessment submissions, to make sure that uh, we don't have a bucket of answers from people of the same race or gender or age category or disability status, um, constantly scoring higher or lower. And we're constantly updating the language and making sure that we are aligned, and we're removing bias from our assessment. So it's so hopefully that answers the question.
Well, actually, I just had a follow-up to that.
Yep.
It's just like a cursory search on the internet. There are like a couple of educational and psychology papers out there that says that different cultures actually define emotional intelligence different, significantly different. And I was wondering if you address that up front. I understand definitely that's a great idea to kind of collect that information on the back end. But as that product is being rolled out to employers, did you address those differences, or how did you address those differences up front in your product?
So when we were deciding the type of questions to ask, we did think about possible responses from different cultures' background. And we thought that since we're targeting primarily office environments, we found that in different organizations around the world, office environments and the situations that people get into are very, very similar, even in different backgrounds. And this helps. We provide questions that are generic enough and not culture specific to be able to reduce that bias that you were talking about. So by providing, to answer your question in a long way, the situations that we present user are generic enough to be to get similar responses across multiple cultural areas.
Thank you. Jessica, got a question.
And I apologize, I missed your presentation. I had to come on late, but and maybe you addressed this already. I think of housing inspectors. So there's two things that a housing inspector does. They give you a report that says, should you buy this house or not? And so it sounds like you are doing assessments of, should you hire this person or not? But does your assessment go into, if you hire this person, these are some areas that this person might need to work on? Or to the employee, if you took this job, these might be some areas that you are weak in or strong in that you could actually help the team that you're going to. So give them more than just a, yes, you should buy the house, or no, you should not buy the house, but here's some issues that you might need to address, but you might want to hire them. So I'm curious if you go into that at all.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. So to answer, you talked about two parts. So we are not implying in any form or way that you should hire or not hire an employee. I think that is subjective because each employer is looking at EI or EQ in different ways. Maybe what we think is a high EQ individual in certain area, they might not need it, and they might need someone in stronger in some of the other EQ areas. So we are not at all anywhere implying or saying that hire or not hire. What we are suggesting is, as an HR, you have selected a list of 50 applicants, and you cannot possibly interview all the 50 applicants. Why don't you take an assessment solution that actually gives you a little bit more insight on the emotional intelligence to narrow down a list of highly qualified candidates, one that already had the hard skills that you had selected on, which is pretty easy to do. But now on top of that, you have also the soft skill side. So these people are more likely to stay with your company and to be productive, both from the hard skills and soft skills. And the second part of your question, now as an employee or as an individual, when I see my report, it actually tells you you are great at these areas and here are the things you can improve. We never say that, you're not good at this. These are things that you can improve. We are really focusing in EQ across our verbiage, our language, everywhere. So these are the things you can improve. How you can improve is up to you. If you want us to help you with that, we would do that eventually. But for employers, we are providing EQ training to address these things. And that's a second module that we talked about for existing team members in a company or enterprise.
Great.
Thank you.
I have a couple of things I just want to touch base on. One is because some of us work with supporting other businesses or interface with a lot of other businesses in the space. How would you describe like an ideal client for you, or do you focus on a specific customer segment or type of business?
Well, Dan, we did extensive market research to address our target demographic or audience. And what we found is that our solution is going to benefit enterprises that have 250 employees or more. That is the best audience for us because we know that they have X number of jobs posted. And on average, I think as per Glassdoor, an average job application gets around 250 applicants, and it takes around 43 days to fill a job, even more than that at times. With us, this kind of enterprise can reduce that process, can improve the application itself, the applicants, and also reduce the time to fill.
Great. And this one's just one of my little, I don't know what it is. It's like a pet project of mine lately. I'm trying to find people in the space that you mentioned soft skills. And I always thought that the soft skills was, those skills are so important. Why call them soft? Have you ever run across any other terms for soft skills that people use out there?
No, that's a great thing, but industry-wise, that has the term that has been used. I mean, I agree that I think the idea of hard skills, soft skills is not really the right terms. They should be changed. They should rather use as technical skills and human being skills or something like that.
Yes,
that would be a better term. But unfortunately, when you talk to most of these HR leaders, it's easier to classify into that. However, I completely agree. I think that's not the right way to present it anyways.
Okay, and then it looks like we got one last question from Tira, and then we'll wrap up the Q&A. Tira, do you have?
Yes, great presentation. My question is, have you thought about strategic partnerships? And if so, have you identified any for now or in the future?
Love your question, Tara. I think you had asked this earlier as well, but happy to touch upon that. Some of the strategic partners that we have identified are EQ training or consultant companies. We also think that staffing and recruiting companies could be our potential partners. We are also looking at what Tara earlier mentioned is we might also look at dating companies, because we feel that this applies to all areas, not just work. As human beings, we interact with people at work in our personal life. So dating is another industry we're thinking about, and we're also thinking about sports. Teams might benefit a lot from emotional intelligence, especially where they're working together day in, day out, and they are kind of second family, just like work. So those are some of the partnerships we have been thinking. However, we have not ventured into those yet.
Nice. Thank you very much. That was great. So now I'm going to share my screen. So we always ask people, what can the 1 Million Cups community do for you? So is there anything that we didn't touch base on, something that we can provide to you that would be of assistance?
I think, Dan, the questions you guys asked have been very pertinent, very useful. So that in itself is going to help us a lot. Secondly, we would love for you or any one of you or your friends or acquaintances to go to our website, take the demo, it's free trial. There's no cost associated with it. There's no credit card required. It's just a free assessment. Take the assessment, give input, and share with other people. And let us know if there's anything we can improve and what do you feel about it. So your feedback is highly appreciated.
Great. Okay, that sounds good. So thank you for that. That was tremendous. And just remember that for anybody out there, you can present just like today, go through this process and get some help on a new idea or a new business direction. You even have coaching available to help you put together the presentation if you'd like. Remember that if you have some way to help out the community, let us know, give us an email, and connect with us on the link tree. And we'll be online again next week. But remember that second Tuesday is going to be in person now. Next week is going to be energetics health. And I'm not familiar with this one, so it should be very interesting. So that'll be our presenter for next week. Now we're going to jump into breakout rooms. Tira, do you have those all set?
Do we want to do a random, or should we choose them? What are you thinking?
Yeah, no, you could just, we could start off with assigning people. That's easiest. Then everybody just pops in and we'll go for it. We're hoping that if you have an opportunity to stick around for a few minutes, we do breakout rooms at the end of the meeting for people to connect in a smaller group, like 2 or 3 people or 4 at the most, and get an opportunity to connect outside of the larger group.
All right.
So you should see those pop up and you can just join right in.